Struggling mom's baby calls billionaire boss daddy. His reaction is unbelievable. Welcome, dear viewers, to Mr. Carter's Stories, where emotions come to life, love conquers all, and every story leaves you with hope in your heart. Here, we bring you powerful tales filled with romance, suspense, and life-changing moments that will touch your soul. Thank you for being part of our journey, because every story we share is made special by you. So sit back, relax, and let the magic of storytelling begin. A special prayer for our viewers. To all our wonderful viewers, may your hearts always be filled with love, your minds with peace, and your lives with endless happiness. May every struggle you face turn into strength, every tear into joy, and every dream into reality. We pray that kindness surrounds you, success follows you, and love always finds its way to you. Stay blessed, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in the beauty of life. Amen. The biting wind howled through the dimly lit streets as Emma Carter pulled her worn-out coat tighter around herself. She shivered, not from the cold but from the crushing weight of hopelessness pressing against her chest. Her 3-year-old son, Liam, nestled against her shoulder, his small arms wrapped trustingly around her neck. He had fallen asleep in the taxi, exhausted from another long day of being shuffled between neighbors who could barely afford to watch him. Emma's stomach twisted with guilt. He deserved better. A warm home, a stable life, food that didn't come from discount shelves, but life had never been kind to her. Not since that night. She quickly pushed the thought away, blinking back the sting of tears. She couldn't afford to break down now. The taxi pulled up to the towering skyscraper of Blackwood Enterprises, its gleaming glass exterior reflecting the city lights. The building screamed power, wealth, and privilege, things Emma had never known. Taking a shaky breath, she carefully shifted Liam in her arms and stepped inside. Desperation knocks on a billionaire's door. The receptionist's eyes scanned Emma from head to toe, her gaze flickering over the threadbare coat, the scuffed shoes, and the unmistakable exhaustion lining her face. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're not hiring," the woman said, barely masking her distaste. Emma clenched her fists. Not this time. "Please," she said, forcing strength into her voice. "I'll take any job. I'll clean floors, wash windows. I just need work." The receptionist sighed, looking bored. "We don't take walk-ins. You need an appointment." Emma swallowed her pride and stepped closer. I was fired unfairly from my last job. I have a child to feed. I'm not asking for charity, just a chance." For a moment, the receptionist seemed unmoved. Then, her gaze shifted behind Emma, and her expression paled. Emma turned and froze. A tall, powerful figure stood at the entrance of the executive offices, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His cold, piercing gray eyes locked onto her, unreadable yet utterly intimidating. Alexander Blackwood. Emma's breath hitched. She had heard about him, the ruthless billionaire, the man with no heart. He was feared in the business world, a man who crushed competitors without blinking, and now he was looking at her. The room went silent. Even the air felt heavier. "Who is she?" His voice was deep, smooth, but utterly devoid of warmth. The receptionist stammered. She's asking for a job, sir." Emma forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'll do anything," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I just need a chance." Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly, scanning her face. Something unreadable flickered in them, but it was gone in an instant. Then, to everyone's surprise, he spoke. "Give her a temporary janitor position. Nights only." Emma gasped softly. The receptionist's eyes widened. "Sir, she's not—" Alexander cut her off with a sharp look. "Did I stutter?" The woman immediately shut up. Emma's heart hammered. She had a job. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a chance. She opened her mouth to thank him, but Alexander had already turned and walked away, his presence like a cold gust of wind. "Sign these papers," the receptionist grumbled, shoving them toward Emma. You start tonight." The secret she had no choice but to keep that night. Emma sat on the small mattress in her one-bedroom apartment watching Liam sleep. Her beautiful boy. His tiny chest rose and fell with soft breaths. His small fingers curled around the stuffed bear she had patched up more times than she could count. She gently brushed his soft brown curls from his forehead. He looked so much like... No. She shook the thought away. The past was the past. But as she stared at his sleeping face, she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't leave him alone. Not again. She had no choice. Tomorrow she would sneak him into Blackwood Enterprises. The cold glow of fluorescent lights flickered above as Emma hurried down the gleaming hallways of Blackwood Enterprises, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every step she took felt like she was walking on thin ice. She gripped Liam's tiny hand, glancing down at him as he clutched his worn-out teddy bear. His curious blue eyes darted around, filled with childlike wonder, unaware of the risk they were taking. "This is very important, sweetheart," she whispered, kneeling in front of him near a supply closet. "You have to stay here. Be very quiet, okay?" Liam pouted. "But, Mommy..." She pressed a gentle finger to his lips. "No buts, love. If you're a good boy, I'll bring you a special treat later." He hesitated but nodded. She kissed his forehead, whispering a silent prayer that he would stay put. Then, with one last glance, she shut the door, leaving her son hidden in the tiny storage room while she hurried toward her assigned cleaning duties. A forbidden encounter. Emma worked swiftly, wiping down the luxurious office furniture and polishing the glass windows that overlooked the dazzling cityscape. This wasn't just any office. It was Alexander Blackwood's private space. Everything in the room screamed power and wealth, from the sleek black marble desk to the crystal decanter of whiskey sitting beside perfectly arranged documents. She had only seen the billionaire once, when he had given her this job. His face had been cold, emotionless, his presence suffocating. She still couldn't believe he had given her this opportunity. Maybe he wasn't as cruel as the world made him out to be. She shook her head. "Focus, Emma. Just get the job done." Suddenly, she heard it. A soft pattering of tiny footsteps. Her blood turned to ice. She whirled around, her heart stopping as she saw a small figure standing in the doorway. Liam. Her breath caught in her throat. And before she could stop him, her son giggled, his tiny feet pattering across the luxurious carpet. Straight toward Alexander Blackwood. A moment that shatters everything. Time slowed. Emma felt paralyzed, her body unable to move, her voice stolen by pure terror. Liam ran straight up to the towering figure standing near the desk, a man feared by the business world, known for his ruthless, emotionless nature. And then, Liam wrapped his tiny arms around Alexander's leg. Emma's breath hitched. Then came the words that changed everything. "Daddy." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Emma's heart stopped beating. The entire room seemed to freeze in time. Alexander Blackwood, the man who never showed emotion, stood utterly motionless, as if he had turned to stone. His piercing gray eyes, normally sharp and calculating, flickered with something unrecognizable. A single word escaped his lips. "What?" Emma felt her world collapse around her. The moment Liam's tiny voice echoed in the grand office calling him Daddy, Alexander Blackwood's world shifted. He had faced the most ruthless businessmen, fought off corporate betrayals, and built an empire with an iron fist. Yet nothing had ever unraveled him like this. His body locked up, his mind spiraling into a deafening void. His cold, unreadable face turned shockingly pale as if all the blood had drained from it. His piercing gray eyes, always so sharp, so calculating, were filled with something raw, something haunting. Pain. Disbelief. A flicker of long-buried memories he couldn't grasp. Slowly, as if moving through a dream, he knelt before the child. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he stared into those eyes. So familiar. So painfully familiar. It was like looking at a ghost. "What did you just say?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of it sent shivers down Emma's spine. Liam smiled innocently, completely unaware of the tension gripping the air. His tiny fingers reached out, as if unafraid of the powerful man before him. "Daddy?" he repeated, his voice filled with childlike certainty. Alexander exhaled sharply, a war raging inside him. Why? Why did this boy look like him? Why did this child's presence feel like a punch to his soul? Then, Emma moved. "Liam, no!" A mother's panic. Emma rushed forward, panic clawing at her chest. Her trembling hands grabbed Liam, pulling him away from the billionaire whose gaze had darkened with unreadable intensity. She felt his cold, penetrating eyes snap up to hers, and her stomach dropped. She had seen Alexander Blackwood's ruthless side in news reports, his ability to destroy people with a single move. And now, she was next. I'm so sorry," she stammered, holding Liam protectively against her chest. "This was a mistake. Please don't fire me, Alexander cut her off. "Who is he?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was something dangerous beneath it. Emma's heart pounded violently. Lies wouldn't work. Not with him. But the truth? That would be even worse. "He's just a child," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, Answer me, Emma." Her breath hitched. Her name on his lips sent a strange shiver through her. No one had ever said it like that before. Raw, demanding, personal. But before she could speak, Liam broke the moment. "Mommy?" he asked, his small fingers gripping the fabric of her shirt. "Why are you sad?" Emma's throat tightened. "Because, sweetheart, I just made the biggest mistake of my life." A demand she can't escape. Alexander slowly rose to his full height, his commanding presence casting a shadow over Emma and Liam. His expression was unreadable now, a mask of control. But his eyes, his cold, powerful eyes burned with something dangerous. "I want answers," he said, his tone like steel. Emma froze. She had expected anger, rage, but instead he was demanding the truth. A billionaire as powerful as Alexander never demanded. He took, and she knew. There was no escaping him now. "I want a DNA test." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Emma felt her heart stop. Her fingers tightened around Liam's tiny shoulders as she held him close, shielding him from the sheer force of Alexander's presence. The billionaire's face was cold, unreadable, but his eyes burned with something sharp, relentless, dangerous. Emma forced herself to breathe. "No." A flicker of something dark crossed Alexander's face. "Excuse me?" Emma's voice shook, but she stood her ground. "You don't need a DNA test. Liam has nothing to do with you." A muscle ticked in Alexander's jaw. He stepped closer, his towering figure caging her in, forcing her to look up at him. "He called me Daddy," he said, his voice low but dangerously controlled. "And I don't believe in coincidences." Emma's stomach twisted. Neither do I. But she couldn't let him do this. She couldn't let him dig into the past. Because if he did, he might discover the truth. And that truth could shatter everything. A night that changed everything 4 years ago. The air had been thick with laughter and music, the grand ballroom bathed in golden candlelight. Emma had never been to a place like this before. The masquerade ball had felt like stepping into a dream. She remembered the way her dress had shimmered under the chandeliers, the way the mask she wore made her feel bold, untouchable, like a different person. And then, she saw him. A man in a black suit, his silver mask concealing most of his face, but those piercing gray eyes had held hers like a magnet. He had approached her, his voice smooth and deep. "Dance with me." She had hesitated. But the moment his hand slid into hers, something inside her ignited. They had danced, talked, laughed, and when the night had deepened, when the world outside that ballroom had felt far away, unreal, they had fallen into each other's arms, It had been passionate, intoxicating, perfect. A night of whispers and tangled sheets, a night that had felt like fate. But when morning had come, he was gone. No name, no note, nothing. All she had left was the memory. And Liam. The impossible truth. Emma blinked back to the present, her chest tightening with panic. Could Alexander have been that man? Number it couldn't be. The man she had met that night had been gentle, warm, not this cold-hearted billionaire who stood before her now, his face sharp and merciless. But then, why did Liam have his eyes? Emma swallowed hard, her pulse racing. She had to end this now. "Stay away from my son," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "I don't care what you think, but Liam is mine, and I won't let you take him from me." Something flickered across Alexander's face, an emotion she couldn't place. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. He straightened, his expression turning cold once more. "You can fight me, Emma," he said quietly, "but I always get what I want." A chill ran down her spine. She had just made the worst mistake of her life. The tension hadn't left the air since Emma stormed out of his office, clutching her son like he was the only thing keeping her world together. Alexander Blackwood sat behind his massive black marble desk, his jaw tight, his thoughts an unstoppable storm. The moment Liam had called him daddy, something inside him had snapped. The child's eyes haunted him. They were too familiar, too much like, no, it wasn't possible. And yet, an instinct buried deep inside him refused to let it go. That was why, without Emma's knowledge, he had ordered the DNA test. Money had power, and Alexander had used it without hesitation. Now, the results were here. The white envelope sat on his desk, an unassuming thing, yet it felt like a bomb. Taking a slow breath, Alexander ripped it open, his eyes scanning the results. Then, he froze. His breath stalled in his throat. Liam Carter is not a biological match to Alexander Blackwood. The words felt like a slap. A betrayal. A lie. A man who doesn't tolerate deception. Alexander's fingers clenched around the paper so tightly it crumpled. His mind reeled. She lied to me. The realization cut deeper than it should have. Emma, that woman, had used her child, used him to play on his emotions, and for a brief, pathetic moment he had almost— No. Alexander slammed the paper onto the desk, his face darkening. He had been played before. Betrayed. Women had tried to trap him for money, for power. He thought Emma was different, but she was just another liar. Emma's heartbreak. Emma shoved her things into a bag, her hands trembling. She had no choice. Alexander's gaze when she left his office had terrified her, like a man who had been burned and would make sure she paid for it. And she couldn't let Liam be caught in the middle. She had to leave. Disappear. But as she zipped up the bag, Liam sat on the bed, watching her with those big, beautiful eyes. "Mommy?" His voice was soft, uncertain. Emma's heart clenched. She knelt in front of him, forcing a smile despite the tears burning her throat. "We're going on a little adventure, sweetheart." Liam's brows furrowed. "What about the nice man?" Emma's breath hitched. Nice? Alexander Blackwood was anything but nice. She swallowed hard, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "We won't see him again." Liam's tiny arms wrapped around her neck, holding her tight. And as Emma closed her eyes, a silent tear slipped down her cheek. She had lost everything. The questions that won't leave him alone. Alexander sat in his darkened office, staring at the glass of whiskey in his hand. But his mind wasn't on the drink. It was on her, on Liam. And most of all, on the unease sitting like a heavy weight in his chest. If the child wasn't his, then why did Liam's eyes look so painfully familiar? Something wasn't right. And Alexander Blackwood didn't stop until he found answers, no matter what it took. The night was cold and unforgiving, the city lights flickering like distant stars. But inside an exclusive penthouse, Damien Holt stood near the window, a glass of bourbon in his hand, his lips curling into a satisfied smirk. The DNA results had been delivered, and Alexander Blackwood had believed them, just as planned. Damien took a slow sip of his drink, his fingers tightening around the glass. It had to be done, because he knew the truth. Liam was Alexander's son, but no one, especially Alexander, could ever find out. Not now, not ever. A web of lies. Damien had been in love with Emma for years, before she had disappeared from his life, before that damn masquerade ball, before she had met Alexander. The memory of her laughter, the warmth of her smile, it had haunted him, taunted him, and when he found out she had a child, he had hoped, prayed. But then he saw Liam, saw the same gray eyes, the same damn resemblance. The truth had hit him like a bullet. Liam wasn't his. Liam was Alexander's, and Damien couldn't let that stand. He paid off the lab, manipulated the DNA results, made sure Alexander would believe the child wasn't his. Because if Alexander ever found out the truth, he would never let Emma go. And Damien wasn't about to lose her a second time. Alexander's restless doubt. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander Blackwood sat in his penthouse, his whiskey untouched, his mind in chaos. The DNA test had said Liam wasn't his. So why couldn't he let it go? Why did Liam's eyes feel like a mirror of his own? And why, when Emma had looked at him in desperation, had it felt like she was hiding something? Alexander had spent his life trusting no one. He knew when he was being played, and something about this situation felt off. Very, very off. Alexander never ignored his instincts, and now they were screaming at him. Something wasn't right, and when he found out what, someone would pay. Alexander Blackwood wasn't a man who got played, and yet he had been. When the truth finally landed in his hands, it was a fury unlike any other. The DNA test had been faked. Damien Holt. The name burned in his mind like a curse. His rival, the man who had spent years trying to take him down, had done the unthinkable. He had stolen the truth from him. Liam was his son. And Emma had disappeared. But there was nowhere in the world she could hide from him now. Finding Emma. It took less than 24 hours. Money, power, and influence, Alexander wielded them all like a weapon. And when he finally found her, the sight destroyed him. Emma Carter, the woman who had once stood in his office defiant and proud, was now a ghost of herself. She lived in a crumbling one-room apartment in the worst part of town. The roof leaked, the heater barely worked, there was no food in the fridge, and worst of all, Emma lay in bed, burning with fever. Too weak, too pale. And in the corner on a small mattress with a thin blanket, Liam sat hugging his knees, silently watching his mother struggle to breathe. Alexander's chest tightened painfully. This was his fault. He had let her go. He had believed the lie, and Emma and Liam had suffered because of it. A billionaire's breaking point. Liam's little head snapped up when he saw him. His big, innocent eyes blinked in confusion. "Mommy said we won't see you again," Liam whispered. His voice was small, too understanding for a child his age. Something inside Alexander fractured. He strode forward, lifting Emma into his arms. She didn't even wake up. She was too weak. Liam scrambled off the mattress. "Where are you taking my mommy?" Alexander knelt, brushing a hand over Liam's messy hair. "Home." Liam looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, uncertainly, he raised his arms. Alexander lifted him too, holding his son for the first time, his heart pounding like a drum. Liam curled into him without hesitation, like he had always belonged there. And Alexander Blackwood, ruthless billionaire feared by all, felt his entire world shift. Emma's heart shattered. She woke up to warmth, soft blankets, a gentle glow of light, and an all too familiar scent. Emma's eyes snapped open. She was in a luxurious bedroom, Alexander's bedroom. Her heart plummeted. She pushed herself up, too fast. Her body betrayed her, weak and trembling. And then, he was there, standing at the doorway, arms crossed, his storm-gray eyes unreadable. But Liam sat beside him, eating strawberries from a gold-rimmed plate, completely at ease. As if this was his home. Emma's throat tightened. No, Alexander didn't move. You're sick. You need care. And Liam, no. Her voice broke. Tears burned her eyes as she clenched the blankets, shaking. You abandoned us once. Her voice was raw, filled with agony. I won't let you break Liam's heart. Silence. A storm passed through Alexander's expression, a look of pain, real pain. Then softly, I won't make that mistake again. Emma didn't believe him. She couldn't. But Alexander Blackwood had already made his choice, and this time, he wasn't letting them go. The storm outside raged, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside Alexander Blackwood's heart. Liam was gone, kidnapped, and the man responsible? Damien Holt, Alexander's greatest rival, his former friend, the man who had betrayed him in the cruelest way possible. Emma stood beside him, her face pale, her hands clenched so tightly they trembled. She had already lost everything once. She couldn't lose her son. Alexander turned to her, his voice steady, deadly. I swear to you, Emma. His gray eyes burned with something raw, something unchained. I will bring him back, no matter what it takes. And when Alexander Blackwood made a promise, he kept it, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. A billionaire's ransom. Damien's call came at midnight. His voice was casual, almost amused. Alexander, old friend, he drawled. I believe I have something that belongs to you. Alexander's grip on the phone tightened. If you touch him, Damien chuckled. Relax. The boy is safe. For now. Emma gasped beside him, her hands flying to her mouth. Alexander closed his eyes for half a second, just long enough to contain the violent rage inside him. What do you want? A pause. Then Damien's voice dropped, dark and venomous. Everything. Silence. Then, I want Blackwood Enterprises. Every single share. Every last dollar. I want you penniless, Alexander. Emma staggered back, horror flooding her face. Number. You can't. Alexander's answer was immediate. Done. Emma turned to him in shock, grabbing his arm. Alexander, no. But he was already signing away his empire, because there was no price too high for his son's life. The final showdown. The abandoned warehouse loomed before them, shadows stretching across the cold concrete. Alexander and Emma moved as one, their fear overshadowed by determination. Inside, Damien sat on a crate, smug as ever. And beside him, Liam. The little boy clung to his teddy bear, silent but terrified. Alexander's heart shattered. And then, without warning, gunshots. The police stormed in, sirens wailing. Damien snarled, grabbing Liam. Alexander lunged. His fist collided with Damien's jaw with a sickening crunch. Liam fell free, straight into Emma's arms. The police tackled Damien, pinning him to the ground. But before they dragged him away, he smirked, blood dripping from his mouth. And then, he said the words that changed everything. Emma never lied to you. Alexander stilled. Damien's voice was mocking, bitter. She loved you all these years, but you let her go. Silence. Alexander's world tilted. His gaze snapped to Emma, her tear-filled, broken eyes, and in that moment he realized he hadn't just lost his fortune, he had almost lost the woman he had always loved. And this time, he wasn't letting her slip away. Chapter 9. A heartbreaking confession. The nightmare was over. Liam was safe. Emma held her son tightly, pressing kisses to his messy hair as he clung to her. Tears streamed down her face, her body shaking from relief. Alexander stood beside her, silent, watching them. His jaw was clenched, his hands fisted at his sides, but his eyes weren't cold anymore. They were filled with something raw, something broken. And for the first time, Emma didn't see the ruthless billionaire. She saw the man she once loved, the man she never stopped loving. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. She lifted her gaze to his, her voice barely above a whisper. "You gave up everything for us." A bitter laugh escaped him. "It wasn't a sacrifice, Emma." His voice was rough, almost desperate. "You and Liam, you were the only things I ever wanted." Her heart twisted painfully. "Then why? Why did you let us go?" Alexander exhaled sharply, stepping back like her words had physically struck him. And then, for the first time in his life, Alexander Blackwood broke. The billionaire's buried pain. His hands trembled as he ran them through his hair, turning away as if ashamed. "I didn't just lose my company today," he admitted hoarsely. Emma froze. Alexander had never spoken like this before, never vulnerable, never open. But now he was unraveling. "My entire life people have used me, lied to me, betrayed me." His voice cracked. "My own mother left me. My father saw me as nothing but an investment." Emma's breath hitched. She never knew. "I built an empire because power meant control. And if I had control, no one could ever hurt me again." His chest rose and fell unevenly. "But you—" He turned, his gaze piercing into hers. "You terrify me, Emma." Tears filled her eyes. "Why?" "Because you're the only person I can't control. The only person who could break me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And you did." Emma swallowed hard, her heart aching. She wanted to run to him, to hold him. But the pain of the past still sat between them. She shook her head, her voice shaking. "You hurt me too, Alexander. You let me walk away. You believed Damien's lie over me." Regret flashed across his face. "I know." His voice was hollow. "And I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you." His next words, they shattered her completely. "I don't care about my company, my money. I don't care that I lost everything." His voice broke. "The only thing I care about is you and Liam." He stepped closer, his eyes filled with everything he had held back for years. "You're my family, Emma." Emma gasped, a sob catching in her throat. Because this was the man she had fallen in love with. Not the billionaire, not the cold, untouchable CEO, but the man standing in front of her bare and broken, willing to lose everything just to have her and Liam in his life. And for the first time she saw his true heart. She reached out, finally closing the distance between them. And Alexander let out a shuddering breath as she touched him. Maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of gold and rose. The warmth of the evening breeze carried the scent of fresh blossoms rustling through the trees of Blackwood Manor's private garden. But none of it mattered. Because at that moment, only one thing mattered. Liam stood before Alexander, his small hands gripping the billionaire's suit jacket. His gray eyes, so much like Alexander's own, stared up at him with an expression so innocent, so filled with something Alexander had never expected, that it nearly brought him to his knees. For the second time, Liam hugged him. But this time, it wasn't a mistake. This time, it wasn't confusion. This time his tiny voice carried words that shattered Alexander's last walls. "I love you, Daddy." A sharp, painful ache exploded in Alexander's chest. Something so overwhelming, so powerful, that for the first time in his entire life, Alexander Blackwood cried. Tears, real, unstoppable tears, welled in his eyes as he dropped to his knees, pulling Liam into his arms. He buried his face in his son's small shoulder, his breath shuddering. This boy, his son, his flesh, his blood. And he loved him. Not because it was expected, not because it was right, but because Liam had saved him, had cracked open his frozen heart, showing him what love, real, unconditional love, felt like. A small hand touched his face, wiping his tears. "Are you sad, Daddy?" Alexander let out a broken laugh, pressing a fierce kiss to Liam's forehead. "No," he whispered hoarsely. "I'm the happiest I've ever been." A love that defied fate. Emma watched them from a few steps away, her own tears falling freely. For years she had dreamed of this moment. She had prayed for it. And now, seeing Alexander, the once untouchable billionaire, the man who had built walls around his heart, completely surrendered to love, it was more beautiful than she ever imagined. He looked at her then, eyes glistening, filled with something so raw, so pure, that she nearly gasped. He stood, still holding Liam in his arms, and then, without hesitation, without fear, he reached for her. Emma didn't resist. She walked into his embrace, her head resting against his chest, feeling the steady, comforting rhythm of his heartbeat. And in that moment, she knew. Alexander had finally come home. To her, to Liam, to the family they were always meant to be. Happily ever after. The wedding was small, intimate. Nothing grand, nothing extravagant. Just them. Just love. Emma stood in a simple white gown, her hands trembling as Alexander slid the ring onto her finger. "I vow to love you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "To never let you go again. To be the man you and Liam deserve." Emma's eyes shone as she whispered back, "You already are." And when Alexander kissed her, soft and deep, sealing their love forever, Liam clapped his hands, giggling. Their family was finally complete. A new beginning. The sound of laughter echoed through the garden. Liam ran barefoot through the grass, chasing a butterfly, his joyful giggles filling the air. Emma leaned against Alexander's side, his arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. Their eyes followed their son, their world. "He's happy," she murmured. Alexander pressed a kiss to her temple. "Because he's loved." And for the first time in his life, Alexander Blackwood knew this was what true wealth felt like. Not money, not power, but love. A love that would stand forever.